Hey, how about that? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the online gathering of what we call The Gathering. This is a combination worship project between Zion Lutheran Church and Pathways Church. And we are glad that you are carving out some time to hang out with us today, whatever day that is that you are watching this. We're glad that you're taking time to hang out with us for a bit. And we want to say a huge congratulations to those in our group who are completing some form of their education. We have people this year who are finishing up high school and people who have graduated from college. And to those of you in our group, we want to just say a huge congratulations to you. It's a big milestone to be completing some of these things in your life. And so we want to be among the first to say congratulations to you. Now, there may be some other people I am unaware of in our group who are experiencing some of these milestones, but let me introduce you to just a couple of these people who we know are graduating this year. First of all, from Everett High School is Avery Anderson. He's been a part of Pathways. I think he was just barely born when Pathways Church started. And just amazing that he is now old enough to graduate high school. And so we want to say huge congratulations to Avery. We also want to give a big congratulations out to Luke Steele, who is also graduating from Everett High School and going to be going on to Montana State University. And so congratulations to you, Luke. Also, Anna Albrecht just graduated from Grand Canyon University. She's back up in this area now and pursuing work, and we are super proud of her. Also, Heather Culper just graduated from the University of Maine with her BA in Business Administration, and we are thrilled for Heather. What a cool benchmark for her to get completed in her life, and we are super thankful and proud of all that she has been able to accomplish. So to all the graduates that we know of, we want to just say, just send our huge thanks and just happiness to you, and hope that you are celebrating in this time as you are making this incredible achievement and celebrating this huge milestone. Now, this weekend is, I guess, we're in summer, technically. I mean, we're in June. I know summer technically doesn't start till partway through June, but we're in June. Now, in the Pacific Northwest, you wouldn't know that by the weather outside. It is getting decidedly rainy here today on Sunday, and is going to be for the next few days, but hopefully you won't drown, and I think there's some nice, better weather on the way. So as you are experiencing that, we're glad this is a perfect day to be indoors and joining us here online as the weather is not so nice. Now, if this is your first time tuning into this group and you want to know more about us, great way to do that, of course, is visit the old internet. It's really catching on. I don't think it's a fad. It might be here to stay for a while. You can go on the internet, go to everettgathering.com, and you can learn a little bit more about this church partnership and our core values and all of those things. But I'll let you to that. You can check that out whenever you would like. But we usually introduce ourselves with two words, which are cautious and curious. We describe ourselves as cautious, particularly about organized religion. Now, many of us grew up around religion, involved in religion, even religion with Jesus' name on it, and we have definitely seen religion used in some ways that's beneficial, positive, helpful, encouraging, even inspiring. But many of us have also seen religion used in some ways that's toxic, exclusionary, harmful, and some of us, and personally, and then even some of our family members and close friends, have been harmed by religion. And so we find ourselves just being a little cautious about organized religion, which I know is weird since we are in fact a church, which is by definition an organized group of religious folks. But we find ourselves in this kind of tension where we are an organized group of religious folk while also being a little cautious, or some would even say skeptical, about organized religion. And we think that that tension is actually a really healthy place to be. Now, the other word we use to describe ourselves is curious. And by that, we mean we like to ask a lot of questions. And we say this each week, but it's clearly okay to ask questions in this group about things that you don't know. If we're talking about something like, I don't know what that is, it's great to ask questions here in this group. But more fundamentally, when we say that we're curious, what we mean is that we don't just ask questions about things that we don't know. We actually spend a lot of time in this group asking questions about things we think we already have answers to. because it turns out that that's where usually our blind spots are hiding, that there's ways of thinking or believing that have been handed down to us, and perhaps we've never fully thought through those things, and so we'll often end up asking questions about things we thought we already knew the answers to. And sometimes we end up in the same place we started, but many times we end up discovering that perhaps there are some other ways of thinking or believing things that we hadn't considered before. So if either of those two words, cautious or curious, resonates with you, then this is probably a group to get to know better. Now, what are we going to be doing here in this online space here for the next few minutes? It's just kind of a whole online worship service tailored to you who is viewing it on the screen. Our worship leader, Billy, is going to come on, and he's going to lead us in 2 songs, and sandwiched in between is a little reflective video, and this is a chance for you to worship along if you would like to do that. And then after that is over, I'm going to come back on the screen, and we're doing a series right now called Community Garden, and we're talking about these statements in the New Testament in the Bible text where the writer is encouraging the church community to participate in life and community together, and there's these one another statements, and we're kind of going through some of these one another statements and seeing if there might be something there we want to cultivate in our culture. And so I'll come back on the screen and talk about that. And then afterwards, I'll lead us into a time of communion. Now, in our in-person gatherings, we take communion together each week. We've got some bread, we've got the cup. They represent the body and the blood of Jesus. And we take them together in person, together at the same time. And it's a kind of a beautiful expression of our communion with God and our communion with one another. But here in the online space, you may be by yourself, but you can still participate in communion. You'll just have to round up a couple of items if you would like to do that. You'll need something for the bread, which could be a little piece of bread. You don't need much. Or maybe it's a little cracker. That would be fine. And then for the cup, you'll need something like maybe you've got a little juice, or maybe you've got some wine left over from last night. I don't know. You might just have Diet Coke at the house. I don't know what you've got. But really the point is, neither of these things, it's so important to have the exact right thing. There is something sacred and holy about it, but that's the intention that we bring to it. The items themselves aren't magical. It's our intention that we bring to these items that makes them sacred and holy. So if you want to gather together a couple of those things and have them at the ready, we'll take communion at the end. And then finally, we're going to wrap up the whole thing with some announcements. Okay, I think that's it. Why don't we get into the music? Billy's going to lead us here in a couple songs, and then after that, I'll see you back here on the screen, and we'll dive into our message today. Okay, Billy, take it away.
Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. Sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. Sing with all we are and proclaim your victory. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, let faith be a song that overcomes the raging sea. Let faith be a song that calms the storm inside of me. Let it rise, let faith arise, let it rise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, this is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you bring down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, God, we give you praise. Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. I see a generation rising up to take their place with selfless faith, selfless faith. I see a near revival stirring as we pray and seek. We're on our knees, we're on our knees, yeah. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. In the and hear my heart and make it clean. Open up my eyes to the things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me. And break my heart for what breaks yours. And everything I am for your kingdom's cause. As I walk from earth into eternity. Eternity, yeah. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. 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 Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna in the highest.
As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because a servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another.
Love that. Love one another. That's what we're talking about. Some one another statements here in our series that we've been doing for the last couple weeks. We're going to talk about family today, and families always got some good stories, don't they? You got some good stories in your family? Just, wild stuff happens in families, painful stuff sometimes, but also humorous stuff. Funny things happen. And it seems like every family just kind of has legendary stories. One that kind of lives in our family has to do with when my sister and I were little kids. I'm the eldest. I was born first. And I was born with pretty blonde hair, actually, like really light hair. And I know, like today, it's not that blonde. It kind of got darker as I got older. Although, now that I think about it, it's getting lighter again because there's a lot of gray that's starting to show up. Not quite blonde, it's gray now. But when I was really little, like 3 years old or so, I had really blonde hair. And when my sister was born, she had very dark brown hair. And I just thought when she was little, she was probably 1 year old, I might have been like 4 or something like that. I thought that she needed really blonde hair like I did. And so one day she was in her crib, and right next to the crib, my parents kept the baby powder, right? You change your diapers and you put the baby powder in or whatever. And so I took that baby powder, and somehow I was 4 or 5 years old. I don't know. Maybe she was 2 and I was 5. Somewhere in there, I was somehow unattended and got hold of the baby powder, and I just started dumping it on my sister's hair, trying to turn it lighter. And I pretty much emptied the entire bottle of baby powder. And I don't know how much you've used baby powder, but it just goes everywhere. And so the entire room was just full of baby powder. It's just floating in the air. And I don't know, what did we learn like a couple years ago? Johnson & Johnson, I think they discovered baby powder has, problems with it, right? I think it has asbestos in it or something. So we probably were just poisoning ourselves there. But I was just trying to turn her hair blonde like mine, and there was baby powder all over the room. My mom came running in, and she saw this and scooped us out of there. She didn't even figure out how we could breathe in this room. And so it's just kind of one of these stories, I feel like I was below the age of accountability. I don't know what I was doing there. But it's a story that has been told in our family over and over again, how passionate, apparently, as a young kid, I was about blonde hair. Now, your family got some stories like that. We're going to talk about family today as a part of our series here. And we are doing this series called Community Garden, Cultivating Relationships with One Another. And what we're doing in the series is we're looking at these one another statements that are in the New Testament. There's something like 52 of them that Paul and other writers tell the churches to do this to one another, love one another, greet one another, accept one another, encourage one another, things like that. And we're taking a look at not all 52, but some of them, because these are some things that maybe we want to plant or make sure that we cultivate and grow in our own church culture. And over the last few weeks, we've already looked at greet one another, and many of us didn't know that greeting one another was a spiritual exercise, but we kind of stepped into that. And then last time we looked at encourage one another. And today we're going to look at another one. Today we have a verse, and it actually has 2 one another's in the same verse. It's a 2 for 1, all right? So we're going to take one of them this week and one the next week. And so let's read it together here, and let's see if you can catch the one another's. I'd be surprised if you couldn't. All right, it comes out of Paul's letter to the Romans in chapter 12, Romans 12. Let's start in verse 9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. All right. Did you get it there? Did you get those two one another's? There were two one another's there in the same verse, right? We'll underline them here. They're right there in verse 10. We've got two of them in one verse. Be devoted to one another. And then the second one is honor one another. We got two of these one another statements in one verse because apparently Paul here is getting very efficient. Okay, he's just getting these in a very efficient manner now. We're getting a 2-for-1 in a verse. Be devoted to one another and honor one another. And there's actually lots to unpack with both of these. And I think both of these things are something that we might want to plant or cultivate in our particular group, where we are devoted to one another and we are spending time honoring one another. But as I said, we're actually going to be talking about family today. Now, on the surface, this verse and neither of these one another's seem overtly about family, do they? Be devoted to one another and honor one another. I mean, you wouldn't read that and think, wow, Paul is using a big analogy for family here. Now you'd say, okay, well, we could apply it to families. Of course, that's true. But just reading the verses we read today, it doesn't just scream, hey, Paul is talking specifically about family relationships. Does it? Well, it doesn't read that way in English, but it's definitely talking about families. And many of our English translations have sort of glossed over it so that we miss it. And so because of that, I had to go back and find kind of an old translation to sort of show you here where the family analogy comes out. I had to find an old NIV translation called, the one from 1984. NIV 1984 has it a little differently. Let's read that. Romans 12, let's just look at verses 9 and 10. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Okay? There it is, right there. We get a little bit of a family flavor here in the 1984 version of NIV, where it says brotherly love, or love for a sibling. Now, I had to go and find NIV 1984 because first we read it in the NIV today, and it just says be devoted to one another in love, okay? And that's not really a wrong translation, but it doesn't tell us anything about family. But if I went all the way back to the 1984 version of the NIV, we got to see the word there, brotherly love. Now, it might be hard for you to find a 1984 version of the NIV because it's not really published online anymore. You'd have to have an old one hanging around your house, and not many of us just carry around old Bibles all the time. But one thing you need to know is this actually leads us into a little bit of interesting discussion about Bible translation, because the NIV is a translation, a modern English translation of the Bible, and it updates fairly frequently. Every now and then, they do an update to the NIV. In fact, many modern translations are constantly going under revisions. So the one I prefer is the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, and they have a new one out just this last year called the NRSV, and they added UE, which is Update Edition. So it is now the NRSV UE, and you may have even seen all of those letters in some of the slides that we have here in our gathering together, because I'm referencing this new updated edition of the NRSV. Now, a lot of modern translations are constantly undergoing revisions and work because the truth is language changes. The text of the Old Testament and the New Testament, of course, isn't changing anymore, but our current language changes, and so translations need updated from time to time. Now, that's different from something like an older translation like the King James Version, right? The King James Version was put together in 1611. They did do an update to it at one point called the New King James Version, but the old KJV, it has remained static and unchanged, while the NIV and other modern translations are constantly updating their vernacular. So now, the question is, why did this verse change from the 1984 where we had brotherly love to the version that we have today that just says to be devoted to one another in love? Why did we lose that family connection? Well, the reason is because in 1984, we more frequently used masculine universal pronouns, okay? Where you would use a male-specific word to refer to all people, right? An example of this is we'd say the statement that all men are created equal. And in that phrase, when we say all men, it's masculine, but it's functioning as a universal pronoun. It's a stand-in for all people, both men and women, or even those who are non-binary specific or intersex or whatever else. The men there just is a stand-in. It's a male universal pronoun, okay? All men are created equal means all people are created equal. And see, today we just don't use as many male universal pronouns. We try to use gender-neutral language to convey more specifically and pointedly that it does in fact refer to all people. And so we might craft a statement today, all people are created equal. And overall, I think that is a very good evolution. I think it's something that we should be striving to do all the time, is using more gender-neutral language when we're talking about something universal. But sometimes in making the transition, we lose a bit of the subtle nuances that still have some important meaning. And this verse that we're looking at today is actually a really good example of that, because the NIV, if we look back at that, in verse 10 there, the NIV translates it, be devoted to one another in love, all right? Which, of course, the verse does mean. But as we notice here, they've actually changed away from the masculine wording that we saw in the 1984 edition, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Translators since 1984 have tried to get away from that male-only sort of language there that already includes women. Obviously, Paul is intending to include brothers, sisters, siblings, right? It's not gender specific really in his mind. Even non-binary counts. And so in the modern translations, they've tried to get away from that by getting rid of the word brotherly and just changing it to the more universal, be devoted to one another. All right? You get it there? Now, while I agree that this is a really good goal, by eliminating the masculine language here, we also, unfortunately, lose the family emphasis that Paul is conveying in his letter. And there's actually a lot more family here than you might think. In this verse, there's actually two words for family. The first one is Philadelphia, like the city, okay? And it means brotherly love. Philo kind of means just like love of, and adelphos is brothers, but it can also, adelphos in Greek can be masculine universal. So it just means brothers, sisters, or more appropriately siblings, but you could just strictly translate it brotherly love. And the other word that is in this text is philostorge, which means familial love. Again, philo is love of, and storge is a type of Greek love that has to do with the love that families have for one another. It's not romantic love. It is not love between friends, although those are important types of love as well. Storge is actually a love between family members. And both of these words are in this verse 10 in this section of be devoted to one another. That's how this gets kind of all compressed in English, is be devoted to one another. But it really means to love one another as brothers in a family sense, as siblings in a family sense. And so this Greek text is saturated, if we can get beyond the English translation, with the picture of family. It means to be devoted like family, loving one another with a sibling-like love. Now, this idea of the Christian family, this picture, is used around 220 times by the New Testament writers. All right, I mean, it's hugely popular way to talk about the church in the Bible, in the New Testament, is to describe it as a family relationship. And in our newer translations, sometimes we can see that and sometimes not. Here's a good example of a place that we can see it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. Now about your love for one another, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. And in fact, you do love all of God's family. See, there we are, the family picture here, throughout Macedonia. We urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. All right, we get the family picture right here. Brothers and sisters, or perhaps siblings. We get that in 1 Thessalonians 4. Hebrews 13:1, another great example. Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. All right, these modern translators here have the word here, brothers, but they are trying to help us see that it means more than just males. It could mean females as well, and they're trying to preserve the family connections by expanding to brothers and sisters rather than just brothers. And I actually anticipate that going forward, we're going to see modern translations, as they are adjusted, start using words like siblings rather than brothers and sisters in order to acknowledge the trans, the intersex, and the non-binary members of our family. And overall, I think that's a really good evolution. But some of the language of families in our Bibles is harder to find in our modern English translations. And the NIV 84, although it doesn't use the wording I'd prefer, does kind of help us to see it. Here's another example. 1 Peter 1, verse 22. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for your brothers, all right? The new NIV translation says for one another, making it gender neutral. Love one another deeply from the heart. Okay, so our new translation is going to make that, it's going to smooth out that word brothers. It's going to gloss it a little bit, and it's going to make it more gender neutral, which is good. But we do lose the picture here of something to do with family relationships. Another example of this is 1 Peter 3, 8 and 9. Finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love as brothers, okay? Our new English translations are going to say love one another. Again, they're going to kind of smooth out the masculine word there. They're going to gloss it, and they're going to make it gender neutral by saying love one another. And I appreciate that we're making something gender neutral, but just notice that we are then losing some of the familial context of this statement. Another example, 2 Peter verse 1, 5 and 7. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness, it kind of ends with this, brotherly kindness. And so our new NIV translations are going to translate that as mutual affection, glossing again over the masculine language and making it more gender neutral. And they're going to do that in both cases here where the phrase brotherly kindness is said. And again, I appreciate that. I think it's great that we're going gender neutral here. But just to point out that you are missing some of the family emphasis of what Paul is saying. Now, I'm saying all this just to point out that there's always trade-offs in translations, okay? Whenever you make a translation and you're trying to compensate for this or that, there's always some unintended consequences or trade-offs. And I think it reads correct with the gender neutral changes. And in fact, I think we should go farther and get rid of just the brothers and sisters language and make it siblings. But sometimes in the way that it has been made gender neutral, you end up missing the component of this group that is really built around the concept of family. And so I think a good new way of describing, maybe translating this verse would be to stick together like family, loving one another the way that siblings love and take care of each other. Now, I know it's a little more wordy than just be devoted to one another, but I think sticking together like family, loving one another the way that siblings love and take care of one another is probably a way of reading this text that really still drives home the emphasis of family while maintaining an idea of gender neutrality. Now, I think this is important. You say, well, what's the big deal? I mean, who cares, right? Well, I think it's kind of a big deal because we really don't want to lose the idea of family in our church communities. Churches aren't businesses. They're not little fiefdoms. I mean, churches are really kind of at heart a picture of family. And we don't want to lose that. And so I think that's a good place for us to focus for a while, because the purpose of this series is that we would kind of start to build into our own culture the serious call to be something more than just a Bible study group, that we would become a community of some kind, that we would become friends, that we would become close, that we would become even like a family. And in the New Testament, there are two big metaphors for the church, okay? There's really the two big ones. One is a physical body, all right? Like we're all members of one body. And that talks about how we work together. But the other picture of the church in the New Testament that's prominent is the picture of a family, that we are all siblings in one family. And that isn't about how we work together, it's about how we relate to each other. And I actually think that that second picture of family is more important, because you could all work together but not really be family, not really have any close relationships. Now, I know for many of us there is a problem with the picture of family, because some of us have a lot of baggage there, don't we? I mean, some of us come from some families where there was a lot of hurt and there was a lot of dysfunction, and there's probably more hurt from the arena of families than almost anywhere else, because some of us came from some really unhealthy families. And I think we should acknowledge that. But maybe a church community should be how we learn a better way, new patterns, a healthier type of love for what it means to be a true family. Gene Getz has this quote. He says, "God designed the church, the family of God, to be a reparenting organism, to bring emotional and spiritual healing to people who have grown up in unhealthy families." Wow, that's quite a statement there. I don't know if that was God's, primary focus for the church, but it seems pretty important, right? I think he's right here. Unfortunately, many of us come from unhealthy family relationships, and then we end up jumping into another unhealthy family at church. There's oftentimes lots of dysfunction in church, and what Gene Getz is telling us is that ultimately the church really should be a place where we are unlearning those bad patterns, and we are learning instead new ways of what it means to be a family in ways that is healthy and good and beneficial. And so we want to do that, and I thought today I'd just give us a couple dynamics of a good family, okay? We want to be a family, but we don't want to be a dysfunctional family. I mean, we're all human here, right? So there's going to be a certain amount of dysfunction that comes along with us. But what we don't want to do is have systemic dysfunction. We have our own personal dysfunction that we are going to bring to the mix, whether we want to or not. But we don't want systemic dysfunction. We actually want some sort of systemic health in this family. So here's a couple dynamics I think that are important for us to keep in mind, dynamics of a good family. And the first one is this: struggle. All right, I think this is actually a really good thing in families. Families aren't perfect. None of them. Mine's not, yours isn't. We all have struggles, and we aren't all going to get along, and we aren't always going to have everything put together as a group. And so what we need is a family where it's okay to be real, where it's okay to struggle. Now, I remember being younger, when I was a kid, and I don't know, we'd be at home or something, and my family would be all fighting. It's the kids, really, not my parents so much, but we would just be fighting and arguing, and then someone would come over, right? My parents would be like, okay, knock off all this fighting, right? So some guests would come over, and we'd all play nice and stop arguing, and then they would leave, and we'd just pick back up right where we left off, right? And why did we do that? Well, because we didn't want the guests to see us fighting and all that kind of stuff. But family, you could kind of get into it. When the guests weren't around, you could get into it, and the reason was because when you're with family, you could be real. And I think we want that as a value in this family too, that you can be real in this group. You can struggle here. You can have questions. You can have doubts. You can have hurts. You can have hang-ups. There can be times you just want to throw the whole thing in. Throw the whole thing away. You don't need to hide or pretend in this group, because families accept one another where they are, and they share the burdens together. Each of us in this group, we have our own dysfunction and hang-ups and hurts and doubts, and reservations, and we're happy to share them with one another. And so we want to create a space where, in a community where struggle is expected, it's welcomed, and it's honored. Now, we are several churches working together as one here now, but for Pathways Church, we had a list of core values from the very beginning. And the number one value, core value for Pathways Church from the very beginning was, guess what? Struggle. And people always thought that was kind of weird, like your core value is struggle. And we'd always have to explain, well, no, it's not something that we're wishing for. Values aren't something that you're trying to like pray for necessarily. We weren't wishing that we would struggle. It was just something that we wanted to notice and value along the way. That we could be real, that we could struggle and not have to sweep it under the rug, but that instead we would slow down, notice our struggle, engage it, and discover that there might be something valuable in going through the struggle with God and with the people in our church family together. Now, the second thing that's a good dynamic of a family is commitment. And this is the idea that we've got each other's back. In other words, we're not going to run away when there's difficulty. And this is sort of what the NIV translators are getting at when they use the phrase, be devoted to one another. That's how families love one another, that they stick with each other even when things are bad. It's the idea that blood is thicker than water, right? You put up with some things with your family that you wouldn't put up with strangers because you've got a commitment. You've got each other's back, right? You're devoted to one another. You know how it is. If somebody, if you're picking on your sibling, that's one thing. But if somebody from outside the family starts picking on your sibling, well, now we've got problems, right? Why? Because I've got a commitment to my family member. I have got some sort of connection here. I'm devoted to this person. Now, not everybody in our group agrees on everything. We see things differently. But in a family, that doesn't disqualify you. Our commitment to each other is greater than any of our differences. And one of our pastors, Christina, she likes to say all the time that we want to be a group of people who stay at the table with difference and disagreement. That even though we disagree, we're not going to get up and walk away from the table. We're going to stick together and we're going to talk with one another and we're going to choose to be in relationship with each other and have commitment to one another and be devoted to one another, even if we have some differences or disagree. We don't walk away from each other simply because we don't see things the same way. And so we choose to treat each other with respect, courtesy, some curiosity where we're interested in the view of the other person, and with a great deal of generosity where we are always assuming the best of the people in our family. And so we want to be a church family that highlights this value of commitment, where we are willing to share our true selves, which is risky, and accept the true selves of others, which is also risky. But we're willing to do it because we're devoted to one another. Now, another good dynamic of families is the idea of humor. I think healthy families do a lot of things together, but one of the things that healthy families do is they laugh together. They have fun together. They enjoy each other, and they don't take themselves so seriously. And we say that a lot around this group, that we take God pretty seriously. We just don't take ourselves all that seriously. And that's why we do stupid stuff like mimosas at church and just all sorts of dumb stuff. We did bunko and dinner the other night. It's a dumb activity. But it's what families do, right? You have dinner and game night. Families just do dumb stuff together, and life is fun, and they start laughing over the dumbest things. And that's, I think, an important ingredient to what it means to be a church family, too. We need to loosen up a little bit sometimes. Find a way to laugh together. And maybe at times that seems irreverent, but it's a way for us to be real and authentic and enjoy life together. I mean, life is only good if we get to enjoy it with the people around us. Now, the fourth thing I'd like to mention is the idea of discovery. Healthy families are always learning about each other. And why are they doing that? Well, because we change as people. You know, like who I am today is very different than who I was 20 years ago. And we as individuals are always changing. And so we are continuing to learn more about the people around us. And I think this is something that healthy families do. They're constantly on this journey of discovery. And maybe this is a really good time to do that with this group. You know, individually we changed, but as a whole, as a group, we've changed a lot recently. There's a lot of new faces because we have two churches who have come together, and then a lot of other people who have just kind of found this group. And maybe we don't know all the faces in the room or in the group. And so even some of us who have been around this community for a long time are in a very different place now where there's people that we've never met or interacted with before. And so I would encourage us, let us cultivate this idea of discovery. Reach out. Start to greet the people around you. Take some initiative to get to know someone. Find out their name. And it also means being curious about them. Being unusually curious about the people around you. Curious about how they think and how they believe. And then curious enough to listen to the perspective of others and be open to learning and discovering something new. Now, another thing that healthy families have in common is usually a sense of responsibility, that you have a role to play in the family. And we spent a lot of time discussing this, I suppose, in the past, but everyone in our community has a role to play. You can and should be involved. And being devoted to one another means that we do our job to help. We do our part. You know, when I was a kid, we always had family chores, right? Did you grow up with some of those? You know, some family chores and, you know, doing the dishes and taking out the garbage and mowing the lawn. And I hated mowing the lawn. And I don't know how many times I got in trouble because I didn't mow the lawn like I was supposed to mow the lawn. And eventually you would do it, though, because it was your responsibility in the family. And our church community is the same way. There's lots of things that are happening all the time in this community. Lots of places that need to be filled. And healthy families share the responsibility. It's not all on one person. We distribute it out amongst all the family members. And there's some really good reasons for that. One, it protects from abuse and weariness. Right? It protects people from being worn out by having all the load on their shoulders. And it also protects from abuse. If one person is doing all the work, it's easy for them then to manipulate and abuse others or to be abused themselves because too much pressure is being put on them. And then, of course, it also helps each person feel included and valuable because they have something to contribute. And so I would encourage you, a good step here in this process is find a place to participate, to join in the life of this community. And then finally, I think a thing that all families do is, healthy families, is they eat together. I mean, food. It sounds so silly, but eating together is something that healthy families tend to do. At our house, life is busy. It's crazy. 2 teenagers in the house, and they've all got events and stuff going on, and everybody's busy. But almost every night we sit down and we eat dinner together. And oftentimes we have a little patio area. We'll sit out there and we'll kind of watch TV together and eat dinner together and talk and chat about our day. And it's just this moment for us all to touch base with each other, laugh a little bit, learn about each other's day, because we all have to sit down to eat. And frankly, you can't have the conversation dominated too much because somebody's going to have to put food in their mouth at some point. There's just something about sharing a meal together that brings a sense of closeness. And maybe that's what would make our church community more of a family too. Maybe if you invited someone to eat with you. Maybe you invited them, hey, let's all go out after our church gathering today and let's just go to a restaurant and eat together. Or, hey, why don't you come over to my house and let's share a meal together. It's just some level of relationship that seems to only happen around the table. I was in a study group in college, and we would get together and we would study, and then somebody had the idea to go get Taco Bell, which, does that qualify as food? I'm not even sure if Taco Bell is qualified as has any nutritional value. I don't know. But in college it did, and we would live off that, right? And it just became our thing. Every time our study group got together, we would get Taco Bell. And then people started coming to the study group. I don't think it was even to study, but just to get Taco Bell, because there was something about us sitting around together and eating that created a sense of community within us. And so it's no wonder that when Jesus gets his family together, he asks them to eat. And Paul reminds us of this in 1 Corinthians 11. He says, "For I received from the Lord what I passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And in the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" I mean, isn't it interesting that when Jesus is going to go to the cross, what he leaves his community, his followers with, in order to remember him and to bring some unity together, is he leaves them with a meal. And as I said earlier, there's nothing magical about these elements so much. It's the intention that we bring to them. And when we take communion, it's just a little cracker, a wafer, and a little thimble of wine or juice. But what Jesus was actually leaving for the people was a full meal experience. He was inviting them to come together around the meal as a remembrance of him. It was an open table, an invitation to come to the table. And some have said that the communion table is often in a church a small table, but in another way, it is the largest table in the world because all are invited. And you are invited to the table today. We're going to take communion. And Billy, our worship leader, he's going to lead us in a song here. And as he does that, if you have those communion elements and you'd like to take them, you may be by yourself today as you're watching this video. But you're not alone. God is with you. And as you take communion, there are people all over the world that are taking communion. And even though you may not be physically present with them, you are spiritually present in doing the same act as millions of people all around the globe. So let me pray for us, and we'll go to communion together. Hey, Jesus, we thank you so much for today. We thank you for our opportunity to be together, even virtually in this way, on a screen. Thank you for our connection with one another. Thank you for a church group like this where we come together from all different walks and backgrounds and traditions, and sometimes we have very little in common. We would never have connected with one another except because of this church community. And we pray that you would help us to become a group that really exists like a family. Help us to become more than study group partners, studying the Bible text. Help us to become something a little deeper than that. Help us to form relationships that are friendships and more than that are family, like sibling relationships. As we go to the table today, we're reminded that you, Jesus, have offered the table to us, that it is an open table, that anyone may come. And we pray that the tables that we set up in our lives would always be open to all around us. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, let's go to communion.
Your faithfulness, oh God. You wrestle with the sinner's heart. You lead us by still waters into mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. So remember your people, remember your children. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. Great is your love and justice, God. You use the weak to lead the strong. You lead us in the song of your salvation, and all your people sing along. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. Hey, your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. Yeah, your grace is enough. Heaven reaching down to us. Your grace is enough for me. Hey, your grace is enough, and I'm covered in your love. Your grace is enough for me. For me. For me. Yeah, yeah.
All right, that's great, Billy. We just have a couple announcements here as we wrap up today. First of all, the gathering meets Sundays at 10 a.m. in our in-person gathering at Zion Lutheran Church in Everett. It's right just south of Forest Park in Everett, and we'd love to have you join us in person sometime if you would like to do that. If you want to keep up to date on all the things that are happening, following us on the socials is the best way. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and the new Threads, and we'd love to connect with you on there if you'd like to follow along with that. Student ministry is happening tonight, 6 p.m. downstairs in the new youth room. So if you're in junior high or high school and you want to meet up and join them, we would love to have you there for that. Also, coming up next Saturday, June 8th, is the Edmonds Jazz Walk, which is something that the Gathering is proudly sponsoring. We've had a lot of work in helping for the Edmonds Jazz Walk, but there's some volunteers still needed. And if you would like to volunteer, you can do that. The Jazz Walk happens from 6 p.m. to midnight on Saturday. There are something like 100 musicians in 13 different venues and 22 bands all over downtown Edmonds, and you walk from one event to the other and you can just check out all this incredible jazz music, professional jazz musicians, and it's a really neat event. It's kind of expensive. It's like $50 or something at the door, but if you volunteer to sign up and check bracelets, you can do that for a little bit and then go to the event for free. So if you want to be a volunteer and help with that, you can visit the Jazz Club, email jazzclubsnorthwest@gmail.com, and you can get information on how to sign up to be a volunteer. Then coming up on June 16th is Father's Day at the gathering. We are going to be having after church root beer floats. We have a soft serve ice cream, and we're going to be sending Dad home with beer. So if you want to bring Dad along with you on Father's Day and plan to just kind of hang out for a few minutes afterwards, we'll have some treats for everybody then. At the end of the month, on June 29th, we're doing a church work party. There's lots of different things around the church property that need to get done. There's some painting. There's running cable for internet. There is power washing. There's washing different things. There's a whole bunch. There's building a railing down one of the walkways. There's light work. There's heavy work. There's all sorts of things that need to be done. So we're going to meet at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll provide lunch. And if you want to come help us, it'd be a great way to meet some people, for one, and also get some work done. Then finally, if you'd like to give, you can do that online. You can go to everettgathering.com/donate, and you can set up a one-time gift or a recurring gift right there online, and you can help support the Pathways Church and the Zion community in this whole gathering adventure that we are doing together. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for today. Hang in there. It's going to be real rainy today, tomorrow, Tuesday, but by Thursday through next weekend, it's supposed to be gorgeous. So hopefully that's true, and hopefully you have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.